All right. I am joined here today by David Heinemeier Hansson, aka DHH, the creator of Ruby on Rails, the creator of Omarchy Linux, the base camp dude. He's been all over, a race car driver, and a guy that has been yelled at by an awful lot of people on the internet that also yell at me, and yet somehow the two of us have never connected and actually had a face-to-face chat. So welcome to the show, David Heinemeier Hansson. Say hello to the universe, my friend.
Thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited for it.
Fantastic. All right. I have several things I want to ask you. But first, I have to ask this, and I'm going to read this so I make sure I get this correct. How many Hitler particles do you have?
I will say that was a phrase I had not heard before, and there's just something almost poetic about it that I almost respect. If this was a literary discussion about a fictional novel, I'd be like, that's a turn of phrase. But if someone means it seriously, and they actually see Hitler in all these little particles all over the place, they're absolutely bonkers, they're absolutely nuts, and we need to laugh at it in its ridiculousness and simply try to route around it. I think that's the essence of what I've been trying to do with Omarchy and so many other projects for so many years, is to just realize, you know what? The internet is a big place and there's some really nutty people on it. And
one or two, yeah.
They say seriously, right? And even if some of them are serious people in terms of their positions that they hold and the power that they wield, the specific statements like Hitler particles are so ridiculous that you simply just have to laugh.
And you can't. You know, the problem is with the Hitler particles thing. And for those of you who missed that, a spokesman for GNOME, not one of the board members, but a spokesman, a guy who writes a lot of their press releases and whatnot, had an entire thing about how DHH and the CEO of Framework and a bunch of other people must have Hitler particles in them because they want to create a Nazi bar of people who have the wrong politics. It truly bizarre tirades. But that is the crazy thing to me, is we have actual leaders in the open source world making these statements. I reached out to the GNOME Foundation like 10 times now. That's an exaggeration, like 6 or 7 times. And no response, none whatsoever. I do know, however, that they got the response, chatted internally about it, and they have like these little matrix chat channels and whatnot about what do we do? What do we do? Do we respond to Lunduke? Oh my gosh, he's asking about the Hitler particles. And then they noticed that there were a bunch of people who were screenshotting all those chats. And so they started locking down all their chats so you can't see them talk anymore, which I was bummed out about because I got great screenshots from those nice little matrix chat channels. But yeah, so how does it make you feel when people liken you to fascists and Nazis and say you have Hitler particles? I mean, like when you see the leaders from within open source say those things, what's your response? Like, what does your gut do when you see that?
Well, the fortunate thing for me is that I have spent about 25 years in public on the internet, and I have seen almost everything. And particularly in the last 5, 6, 7 years, that line of argument that anyone who has politics that are to the right of the far, far left are Hitler or Nazi or whatever has been a recurrent theme. So it did not have the shock effect that it had on me when it first started appearing, I don't know, about 5 years ago, where this was really novel. This was a very novel technique that they were using these slurs to sort of just label anyone that disagreed with them, and you were a Nazi, you were all these other things. So at some point, actually, it's just become, trite, and it's just become part of that whole universe to a degree where none of it is novel, none of it is surprising, yet it's still sort of just disappointing. I have gotten so excited about Linux in the last 2 years. And first, I actually started with GNOME. I did a remix of Ubuntu called Omakube that built on top of GNOME, built on top of a lot of these technologies. And I thought, like, you know what, this is great. I'm so happy that all of this free software exists out there. Now I've moved on to something else with Omarchy and with Hyperlin and with Arch, but I still just find it disappointing that that's where we're at. And I also just find it baffling that someone shows up, starts contributing, starts getting people excited about Linux, and the response is, no, not that kind of excitement. You're the wrong kind of person, because what you have some completely mainstream political takes on, I don't know, immigration in Europe or any other topic that there might exist out there, shared with literally millions of completely ordinary people. And that's the lightning rod. Like, that's why we can't just collaborate together to make open source better for everyone. It just seems like such a weird, insular, and sad place to be. I wish it wasn't sudden like that, but it doesn't really have the big impact. I don't really feel like, oh my God, there's someone on the internet who said I was a Nazi. Yeah, do you know what? Line up.
Mom, someone on the internet made fun of me.
That ridiculous argument over the years.
Yeah, I agree. When it first started happening to me, it was like, oh, damn. I just, like, when not just a random schlub on the internet, but when a president of a foundation started calling me names. This was many years back. It kind of hit me. I was like, oh, dang. What did I just say? Like, I had to go back and reread. Like, did I really say something that horrible? And now at this point, I just assume that the people saying that to me, I just have like emotional problems. Like, I can't remember who said it, but someone once said you can really judge a man's character by their enemies. You know, like, it almost more so than their friends. When you see the kind of people that start attacking someone, you can start to kind of judge it. Like, okay, all right, I now know what kind of guy that is. And when the crazies start coming out of the woodwork and start attacking people like the DHH, I'm like, oh, okay, now I want to talk to that guy. Now I kind of would like to look a little bit more at the projects he's working on. It's a strange thing, but it's how it is.
That this is absolutely there. I wish it wasn't. But in the grand scheme of things, in the thousands of people I've talked to, it is a tiny minority. And what used to be true about 5 years ago was that small minority had everyone else quite silent. No one wanted to be next. No one wanted to line up and defend someone online, because then it was their head on the block after that person had it chopped up. But that has really changed. Like, there is no longer this universal fear that if you call this nonsense out as the ridiculous junk that it is, that somehow there's going to be some calamity affecting you. Somehow they're going to get you fired. Somehow there's going to be any of these consequences. Like, we've left that realm for the majority of people in the majority of the industry, certainly in the core of the tech industry. I know that academia still has quite a lot of issues, and then if you're in nonprofit and so on, maybe there's problems there too. But broadly speaking,
yes,
it just isn't as menace that it was just a few years ago. And I think that's just really nice to see, because you see that the vast majority of people, even the vast majority of people like Linux, are totally normal people who can get excited about technology, who do not need to enforce their politics on everyone else.
Yes.
And I think that's just, you gotta, one of the things I've noticed is, if you spend too much time on X and you spend too much time sort of wrestling with this, you can get the misconception, and I've certainly been liable for that from time to time, like, oh my God, there's just so many people and this is all what there. No, there's not. You go anywhere out in the real world. I've been at a ton of conferences. People are just so excited about talking about Linux, talking about Omarchy, talking about all these other things. And the vast majority of them do not even sort of assign any value whatsoever to all of this nonsense. It's sort of a curiosity. It's a sideshow. And we collectively need to treat it like that, without sort of paving over it, without forgetting the fact that some of these organizations really are hopelessly, or not actually hopelessly, I would not say that. I think there's a lot of hope.
There's hope.
Are currently captured.
Yes.
That could totally change.
Absolutely.
It could change next week. It could change next month. It could change next year.
100%.
The capture, as it was like a couple of years ago, seemed near total. Then suddenly,
it felt
boom,
pretty gosh darn hopeless to me for a while. Can I just say, I think you're right. There has been a shift, especially over the last year, where people are like, you know what? Okay, you can call me a fascist. You can call me a Nazi. You can say I'm filled with Hitler particles like metachlorians running through my blood. And it's fine. You're just being wacky, right? And a lot of that shift is because, and I'm not trying to butt kiss you or anything like that, is a lot of that shift is because of people like you who finally said, it's fine. You can do that. This is stupid. And you've been yelled at for like a lot of your blog posts and whatnot, where you basically, and I'm paraphrasing, came out and said, this is stupid. Don't do this. And, it's people like you, Brendan Ike, and like various other people out there saying, no, I'm not gonna do this. And it's encouraged average people. Okay, that came out weird. But the people who don't have some stupid internet platform where they can yell really loud to say, okay, maybe I don't need to be bullied into silence by a bunch of people who just want to name call. And so I appreciated when I started seeing you like increasingly come out and be like, no, this is dumb. Don't do this. I was like, yes, we have more people. The more people that stand up, they sort of act like a poo flinging shield where the poo that's getting flung at people isn't hitting the rest of everyone else, because now there's you standing up and Brendan Ike standing up and other people standing up and saying, no, I'm not going to do this. And so now everyone else feels safe and comfortable, like they're part of a team. They can stand up and say, I'm just a normal person. Please stop flinging the poo at me. And so I appreciated when you came out, because it takes a bit of guts to do that. I mean, you put a little bit on the line when you come out and you make blog posts about your thoughts on immigration, your thoughts on you can't call people Nazis and fascists all the time, your thoughts on all these things. You put a target on you and your company and everything else, and you put stuff on the line to do it. But it's the right thing to do, and I really appreciate it. It's a nice thing. It's a little bit of light, and among everything else, I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, thank you. I do think I have somewhat of an obligation to do it, because there are a lot of people who have, or certainly had, some justifiable fears that if they said the wrong thing online and if the wrong kind of people came after them with these baseless accusations, their job might be in jeopardy.
Right.
Well, I can't get fired. I'm too rich to get fired. I own my own company. There's just those kind of pressure techniques don't really work. And therefore, I do have the liberty to speak my mind more often, to stand up for some of these principles I hold dear. And I should. Right? Like I should do those things when it is easier for me in my position to do so than it is for so many others. And I think once that happens, exactly what you say will follow. That people who might have a little more on the line, who might feel like they're a little more exposed, will realize actually the exposure largely has disappeared. These things have vanished. And I think this is one of the reasons when you look at popular culture, this whole, I don't know if you caught that interview with Sydney Sweeney with GQ, I think, that's been all over the internet, where sometimes you have this dynamic where everyone feels like when they get a certain question or they're called a certain way, they have to apologize, they have to appease, they have to do all these things. And then suddenly someone just says, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not accepting your premise. I'm not apologizing for nonsense that doesn't exist. I'm just going to say no. And it does have this cascading effect. The technical term preference falsification looms very large here, that there's a lot of people who think that everyone else is in on it. Everyone else is up to date on the latest dogma and the latest nonsense, and they're just alone in the world. And then they realize by just a handful of examples, that's not true at all. Yes. That the majority of people want nothing to do with this nonsense. And a couple of examples of someone just saying, no, I'm not doing that, we're not doing that, is enough to tip it over, and there goes the dominoes. And in the end, it's revealed that there's just this tiny little core of hardcore nutcases who want to push all this stuff, and they can puff themselves up into this big tiger, but like one little prick and
people get excited. I love it when I see like those sorts of instances when someone says, this is dumb. I'm not going to play along with this. This is stupid. Everyone gets so excited. You don't see people just legitimately get excited and start cheering for things quite as much as that. Sweeney did it, or you did it, or whoever else does it. They stand up and go, No, thanks. I'm good. Everyone's like, yes, and they just want to stand up and do a wave. It's fantastic. It is good to see. It warms my icy little heart. It is just truly wonderful. I want to pivot away from the pure politics for a moment. You made a post over on the X, which I'm going to read, even though it has some naughty words in it. Watch your language, young man. It has some naughty words, but it really struck on something interesting. And just to give a little bit of background for everyone. So David here created a Linux distribution, what I would call a Linux distribution called Omarchy, that is based on Arch Linux, right? And since that had occurred earlier this summer, Omarchy has been attacked, I don't know a better way to put it, by a lot of the same people that would use phrases like Hitler particles and whatnot as not being a real Linux distro, right? As just being a collection of scripts, and they make these sorts of attacks. And when I saw these attacks occurring, it triggered about 1,000 memories in me, because I've been covering Linux since the 90s, and this has happened over and over and over again. And I wanted to read this post from David here. So I'm going to read to you real quick. You can spot an aggrieved Linux loser. And already I'm like, yep, he's going to piss off all the right people. You can spot an aggrieved Linux loser by the attempt to gatekeep the term distribution, like it was a royal distinction of honor. I don't give a beep what you call a compilation of configs, tools, and programs with a custom installer that ships on an ISO. This level of petty nerdery relies on the misconception that your precious terminology has any meaning to outsiders, as if it's obvious that they have any interest in climbing your little status hierarchy by playing your silly games. I don't. You can call Omarchy a distro, a remix, or a .files dump for all I care. Whatever your fragile nerd ego needs, if you must demean newcomers who didn't honor your silly rites and rituals, I'm just going to keep pushing Linux to a new audience by shipping a great system. There's a great misunderstanding that the year of Linux on the desktop depends on approval. The kind of existing Linux losers who think their nerd status is contingent on beeping on newcomers and their excitement. It's the tech equivalent of bemoaning an indie band for selling out if they dare produce a hit that lets them play big stadiums. Defining your identity around using Linux because it's not mainstream is the same sort of hipster pathology. Okay. Just to say this flat out, for those of you who were around when Ubuntu started, Ubuntu was nothing more than Debian with GNOME and Brown. That was Ubuntu. The whole point of Ubuntu was it was a pre-configured Debian to make it easy to install. That was the whole point from Mark Shuttleworth when Ubuntu started. Nothing else at all. Linux Mint, another one of the biggest distros. It started as literally nothing more than Ubuntu with illegal media codecs. The whole point of it was that when Linux Mint started, it was the MP3 codecs. You could not distribute them in some countries like the USA, so Ubuntu couldn't play MP3s back then. It also couldn't play DVDs because, I don't know, DCSS, and if you guys remember all that stuff, you couldn't have DVD playback in Ubuntu. So Linux Mint was Ubuntu with illegal to ship in the USA codecs. That's all it was. Now, is it a distro? Of course it is, but that's all it was. But I thought this really hit the nail on the head, and this repeats every couple of years. We see another distro pop up, and it becomes popular. And all of the people who love the existing distro start attacking it as, that's not a distro, it's just a bunch of configurations. Every time. Every friggin' time.
What I loved about that line of argument was it was paired with these other two very bizarre things. One was that Omarchy is very bloated because it's 6 gigabytes, which, by the way, is almost identical to the Ubuntu ISO. I think the Ubuntu ISO is like 5.4,
They're all
5.3
huge.
or something.
They're all huge. Come on, we're comparing to apples to other kinds of apples here. Like they're all gigantic. every Linux distro is way too big. Every single one. And you know what? Omarchy is too
Or it's
big.
just right.
But they're all
Or it's
too
just
big.
right and it doesn't matter. Or just right and it doesn't matter. I think this is one of those things that I've observed over so many years with computers, which there's a special kind of affliction that happens to people where their mental model of what's too much gets locked into a certain period of time. I had a bunch
Yes.
of friends who were Amiga programmers, and they were used to doing things, incredible things in like 4 kilobytes. They'd produce these demos.
Yeah.
That's an incredible amount. Like, what do we have? Like, we have XML files that are larger than 4 kilobytes today, and they ship entire demos in it. And some of those guys got stuck in this idea that anything that was substantially larger than that was just wasteful. It was just
fair.
bloatful. And you know what? There's a part of your brain that should have some of that. Is this proportion? Is this right? And so forth. And then there's also some of your brain that should embrace a little bit of abundance. I mean, I'm sitting here in an apartment. I have a fiber connection. Do you know how long it takes me to download 6 gigabytes? It takes like 23 seconds. Now, I understand that's not everywhere. And some places it's going to take more than 23 seconds to download.
That's a fair point. I mean, I remember when it would take like 3 hours for me to download a 1 megabyte file. Like, I mean, that's a fair point.
Yes.
Yeah.
But again, what is that point even? Is the point then that Ubuntu is also illegitimate as a distro because it's in the many multiples of gigabytes? I don't even know where that is. And then the final thing I thought was amazing was the problem with Omarchy was it's mainly strung together by bash scripts. Like, could you reveal more of your ignorance of how Unix systems through time have been configured and set up? Do you think like everything was written in Rust yesterday? It just is not how these things are. I happen to really like Bash. Bash was the kind of language that I'd used for sort of on and off. And then when it came to Omakub and then Omarchy, I thought, you know what? This is the perfect fit for what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to install a bunch of software and configure it, mainly copying files back and forth, running shell commands. That's what Bash is for. I don't want to write in Ruby. I totally could write in Ruby. I could write in a lot of things. Maybe you could write in Go. Maybe you could even write in Rust if you
could write it in Pascal if you wanted to. But Bash, it's the system scripting language right there in the terminal. It's there. Why not? It's old school.
I think what all of these things underscore, both whether it's a distro or not a distro, whether it's too big or whether it's using Bash, is that sort of it's grappling for straws. What the main problem is that Omarchy has attracted an enormous amount of attention. Hundreds of thousands of ISO downloads, tons of videos, and perhaps most irking to some of these people, a gazillion people who love the system, who've been introduced to Linux because they were running Windows, because they were running Mac OS, and now, for whatever reason, maybe it's because it's quick and easy to install, maybe it's because of my sort of aesthetics on it, maybe it's because of what's pre-installed, for whatever reason, have decided that Omarchy is their ticket into Linux land. And rather than go, isn't that great? A bunch of new people just showed up to our party. We've been decrying for literally 35 years that people are just not realizing that Linux is really good, and they've been brainwashed by the marketing department at Apple or at Windows not to run Linux. Then they show up, and what's the response? Oh no, I don't want that. Like, they're the wrong kind of people. They're wrong kind of people. Why can't they just install Arch from scratch? Why can't they spend 150 hours configuring Hyperland? Like, they're not worthy. That's the kind of Linux loser I'm talking about. There's a ton of Linux aficionados, Linux experts. I have the greatest respect for people who put in a lot of time on this. I stand on top of giants when I make my little system, but there's a kind of Linux loser who will, at one hand, decry that not enough people see the wisdom of running these systems, and then also the second someone shows up, go like, oh my God, then my nerd credit points are evaporating somehow in my little brain because I spend hundreds of hours setting up this system. And now what? Someone could do that in 2 minutes? That's not fair.
I mean, that's the whole point of a distribution.
Get more people here?
That's the whole point of a distribution. That's why it was called a distribution. I mean, we used to boot root things. I mean, and boot root was, the first distribution, but it was a pain in the butt. The early Slackware was a pain in the butt. The early SUSE stuff, which predates all the Red Hat stuff, was a royal pain in the butt. I mean, those systems were difficult and they got easier as they went. And then people were like, no, I think I can make this even easier. And they'd create a distribution of configurations, a bunch of shell scripts, a bunch of pre-installed tools, pre-compiled stuff. And that's the whole point of a distribution. I think a lot of people doing the yelling weren't around when we were actually coming up with these terms. Like they forgot what the term distribution actually even meant. Like literally what you're creating with Omarchy, that's the literal definition of a distribution. Same like Linux Mint. When it was nothing more than Ubuntu plus illegal codecs. And I mean, as much as I like those codecs, it was a distribution. That's exactly what it was. You may thought it was simple, but it was exactly a distribution.
But I think what's even more important here, actually, and that's the point I'm trying to stress, is no one cares. No one cares about that little word. You care about it in this insular little bubble.
Yes.
I am not interested in converting people over from Gen 2 or their hand-rolled Arch or whatever. That's not the audience I'm talking to at all. That is a vanishingly small number of total computer users. It's even a vanishingly small number of developers. There's a much, much bigger world of people who just don't find that term to be worth anything. What they want is a great system. What they want is to have fun with something that looks great, that's more productive than what they've been using before. These terms are just completely meaningless. They're just inside the little bubble, and I'm just not interested in that. We got to expand this. We got to poke the bubble. We got to explode the bubble. We got to get much further. If we want Linux to do well, we should be slightly embarrassed that it has 5% market share. That's what everyone's clapping their little hands about, right? Oh, I mean, it's good. It's
good numbers. It's good numbers, but yes,
it could be 2%, right? 5 is better than 2%. But why isn't it 10%? Why is it in 15?
It's not as bad as Firefox, right?
Why isn't it just a lot higher? Firefox was a great example of that. When that first came out, boom, it just took over. Now, unfortunately,
and now it's sub 2%.
Unfortunately,
yeah.
It's a good browser, right? But when you look at desktop OS share, Linux is not in a great position compared to where it is everywhere else in embedded systems, on servers, and so forth. And I just want to do my hand to help out with that because I just discovered Linux on the desktop 2 years ago. I've been watching it from afar for literally 30 years. I saw folks installing Slackware back in the 90s, and I went like, you know what? I don't think I'm that kind of nerd. And
you're not that kind of nerd.
That went on for a long time, right? Like I was a big fan of the Apple ecosystem while they were focused on making great hardware and software.
Yeah.
Once they got focused on making a lot of money on services, I became a bit less of a fan.
Yeah.
And then I just discovered, you know what? There's a ton of wonderful Linux stuff that has been created over literally 3+ decades. If we put them all together in this kind of way, we can create the kind of system that I would have been interested in using. And you know what? One thing I found over the years is that whenever I'm making Ruby on Rails or I'm making Kamal or I'm making my commercial projects at Basecamp or Hey, what I like is not unique. I will like something and I'll always go, do you know what? I bet there's about 200,000 other people just like me who would want the same kind of things, who would want the same thing out of a distribution or a Linux system or whatever else you want to call it. And if I make something and I enjoy it, I feel like almost a moral obligation to take all that, put it in a box and say to the world, here you go. Here's a gift. You can choose to not accept the gift. You can choose to ignore the gift. But if you want to open the gift and enjoy it, that's great. You can do any of those things, and I'd be happy either way. And I think this is what's so funny about open source is no one's getting snookered here. No one's getting scammed into buying something really expensive, and then it's actually kind of shitty. Like, it takes 2 minutes to install Omarchy on a fast computer.
And
if you do that and you find out it's not for you, what have you lost? You've lost 2 minutes of your life? Oh my God, what an investment to forgo, right?
Well, but now you do that. and your computer is now infected with Hitler particles. I mean, that's a cost right there. I want to double back to something you pointed out. So hundreds of thousands of downloads of Omarchy. Two things with that. I find this absolutely fascinating. The first is you just started this July of this year.
End of June was the first release. Just the beginning of July.
So we're a couple of months in. Hundreds of thousands of downloads of the current round over the last month or so. I mean, crazy numbers. I mean, I know a lot of the top 10 Linux distributions that would kill for those sorts of numbers. I mean, I used to sit on the board of directors of one of them, and they would love those numbers. Those are good numbers for Linux, right? The second thing is you posted a screenshot over on X where, guys, go over to his X account if you want to see it, where you showed the breakdown of platforms that were downloading it. And it looked like, was it over 2/3 of them weren't not Linux? It was very heavy. It was mostly Windows and a pretty good chunk Mac, but not as many from the Linux side. So to your point,
less than 20%, I think. Less than 20% were pre-existing Linux users.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Now, I mean, we always get, I remember back when I was working on OpenSUSE and all those other things, I remember we would see a pretty significant amount of downloads happening on Windows, but it was always the minority. It was always less than Linux. It's amazing that we're seeing a Linux distribution that looks super nerdy. I mean, just mega. Omarchy looks crazy nerdy. It's like a love note to your inner 1990s like nerdy hacker movie looking Linux operating system, right? And that's resonating with Mac and Windows users who are like, oh, I want that. Yeah, I want something that looks like I'm the guy sitting next to Angelina Jolie in Hackers. Like I want that look, and it is resonating with non-Linux users. That to me is noteworthy.
That was the mission from the get-go. I have no interest in cherry picking a few distro hoppers. Oh, you go from one distro to another. Like, if you're already in Linux, I'm so happy for you. You've already arrived where you probably have a lot of opinions about how everything goes, notwithstanding that there are actually a bunch of people, including people on Linux who've been using Linux for decades, who've come to like Omarchy. I'm thrilled about that. But you're not the main audience. The main audience is the other 80, 85% who are not used to Linux at all, who have been using Mac, who've been using Windows, who don't even know that a computer can look like this, who don't even know that a computer can work like this, who don't even know that Linux can be something more than just this uber difficult to install, difficult to set up, thing that always break, whatever. All the stereotypes about Linux, which by the way are also partly true, sometimes entirely true, sometimes partly true. Things do break occasionally, right? Like when you run this fast as we have with Omarchy, we've done 3 major versions and I think like 40 releases in the past few months. A few things will break here and there. But if you position this as, you know what? This is not Windows. It's not Mac. It's not trying to even look like it. In fact, it is trying explicitly to do the opposite. Because I always looked at Linux and go, like, why do I just want a cheaper, slightly worse version of Windows? Like, that just doesn't appeal to me at all. Like, even as something as simple as the aesthetics of it. I don't want what looks like the Timo version of Windows. That doesn't have appeal to me. I don't think Windows is a particularly attractive operating system, and even less so when, whatever, the fonts don't line up. So, I'm not interested in that. What I am interested in is some of the work that has been happening, these subcultures, like our Linux or Unix porn on Reddit was a great inspiration for Omarchy. There's a bunch of individuals who riced their system and came up with something that was completely unique. A lot of it, to my sensibilities, was a little too far, but I looked at all of that and said, do you know what? If you just dial it back 30%, and get rid of all the waifus and the anime women and whatever. Just dial it back a little bit. There's a core here that's exceptional. This is how I found Hyperland, and then I started using Hyperland, and I went, holy smokes. I knew about window tiling managers. I knew about i3. I knew about DWM, but they always feel felt like, do you know what? Again, that kind of category of nerd that I didn't see myself into. And then Hyperland comes out with a far more polished aesthetics, everything from the
Smooth
animation
animations,
to
yeah.
borders to everything just went like, oh, no. This is me. This kind of aesthetic is me. I take some of this Unix porn stuff, I dial it back a bit, and I infuse some of my sensibilities, partly shaped out of the 90s, BBS systems, the Omega demo scene, early games, retro gaming. I take all of that and I put it into something that I didn't want to use for work, right? Because what happens with a lot of the racing stuff is it's almost like it's an exercise in and of itself. It's just to create a cool system, and I have tremendous
It's just
respect
to
for that.
create it.
That's just not why I use my computer most of the time. I use my computer partly because I love computers and I want to use computers, but also because I want a tool that can create commercial software. So I think these worlds can totally coexist and they can intermingle, and we can get workstation class operating systems that people use to create billion-dollar businesses with that also look amazing and feel better than Mac, feels better than Windows, is built on top of Linux, and can therefore attract an entirely new audience. Literally hundreds of thousands of people who can give it a go, and not like 99% is going to stick with it, but some portion is going to stick with it.
Sure.
And the testimonials
People
I'm
are going to
getting back
test it
are
out. Yeah.
incredible. They're incredible. Like, people are not just like, oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah, okay, maybe. They're like, I love it. I love it.
You know, to that note, it is amazing to me, and I know you've commented on this too, but it's amazing to me how many people try out Omarchy, screenshot it, or take a picture of their desk with it running, and then post it and say, this looks cool. It's been a long time in the Linux world since that's been happening. That used to happen all the time. There was a time in the late 90s, early 2000s when that was normal. People would install it. They'd be like, put on some new themes. They'd be like, check this out. I made it look like this. Look at this. I made my Linux desktop look like an old Amiga. I made it look like Next Step. And they'd get excited and they'd post it. People have kind of stopped doing that. There's still parts like the Unix porn and whatnot where they still do that a little bit, but people have stopped doing that. By and large, all of the Linux distributions all look exactly the same. Fedora, OpenSUSE, SUSE Linux Enterprise, Ubuntu, they're all pretty much vanilla stock GNOME. That is 90+% of all Linux distributions. So I think when people saw Omarchy with Hyperland, and credit to Hyperland developer Vaxry for the work he put in on this, I think when they saw something that was distinctly different, that was a polished tiling manager, like you said, again, there's been a whole bunch of them, Xmonad and so many others that have been popular over the years, but they've never been easy. They've never been fluid and animated, and they never quite looked like the late 1990s hacker movie visuals. And I think Hyperland really captured that. And so by going with Hyperland and then really tricking it out like you guys did, I think you did capture something. I want to point something out, and I want your thoughts on this. Arch Linux, which you guys chose as your base, has been made fun of in the Linux world for years. By the way I run Arch has kind of become that meme of there are dedicated Arch users. I've liked Arch for a long time, but I tended to not use it. It was always these people over here like it, but they're kind of the weirdos. And then along comes not just Omarchy, but before that, Valve. And the two of the biggest inroads into getting Windows and Mac users over to Linux have been SteamOS, and now Omarchy is kind of doing the same thing. And so now what we're saying is what is becoming Linux on the desktop is Arch. And I think that's breaking a lot of people's brains. It kind of broke my brain for a little while. I'm not going to lie, because I think we all assumed it would be Debian based. If there was ever a moment when Linux became popular among the mainstream, I think we all thought it was going to be Debian based. And we thought, you know what? Red Hat couldn't quite seem to crack that nut. They couldn't seem to make it happen. And then along came Canonical and Ubuntu with a Debian version. And we thought that's going to do it. That's going to make it happen. And they never quite could. And then Arch, two completely different systems, focusing on their own weird custom UIs, building on top of Arch, are now grabbing the attention of Windows and Mac users. How the heck did that happen? Like that blindsided, I think, a lot of people.
I think for my own sake, the appeal of Arch is almost the polar opposite of what attracts folks to Omarchy. Omarchy it's all in. It's got all of its stuff there. I'm installing all of my application. It is ready to go 2 minutes after you've put in the SD drive, right?
Yeah.
Arch is exactly the opposite. It has nothing. It's a completely blank slate. There's literally nothing installed. And that means it's the perfect canvas for what I wanted to create with Omarchy, what Valve wanted to create with Steam Deck. The perfect canvas is clear. Now I can paint my Omarchy picture on that canvas in what I at least found much more easily than if I were trying to remix Ubuntu, which I tried to do. I did that with Omakube. That's a nice project. It's finished because it's only so much you can do when you're coloring around the edges of a frame that's already been filled in like Ubuntu has.
Yeah.
Arch is exactly the opposite. It's just a white canvas. And I think that's really attractive. Now, I understand why Arch got the reputation it did. Before the Arch install, it was sort of, you said, I run Arch, by the way, because you knew others were unlikely to do the same because it was difficult. Yeah. But the thing about difficulty is that not all difficulty is valuable. Your ability to sludge through the difficulty of setting up Arch without Arch installed from scratch, in my opinion, is not all that valuable. It is difficult. Few people did it because, you know what? A lot of folks just have better things to do with their time. So they chose a more full-rounded system and whatnot. So maybe that's part of it, is that there was a certain type of user who was attracted to low-value, high-difficulty tasks. That was the typical Arch user. For some stereotype of it, I'm sure there are many different kinds of people who chose Arch in the past. And then here along comes two very different systems, one focused on gaming, the other focused on developers and others who just love computers. And just, it takes that as a baseline and then builds something completely different on top of it, right? And then invites an entirely new set of audiences onto the Arch sort of canvas who would never in a trillion years have used Arch without that, right? The vast majority of Omarchy users would never, ever have downloaded Arch ISO and just went through it and spent 30 minutes configuring whatever they have to configure without.
They're
Arch
not stage
now,
2 Gen 2 install sort of people. Yeah, I get
exactly. So, I mean, Arch install, actually, that command, I think it's almost undersold. And I don't know, it has fully corrected the misconception of Arch, because when I first started, I saw, oh, very nerdy. And then I realized, oh, man, as soon as I learn how to use this, this is the fastest way I have ever installed Linux. Like, I've installed Ubuntu a bunch of times. I've installed a bunch of other distros. Never have I gotten a system as quickly up and running as with Arch, because you start with the blank canvas. There's almost nothing there. You run Arch install. You have that base system. Now, then you have to set up everything, right? Like, that's what I did with Omarchy. Literally put in hundreds and hundreds of hours getting Hyperland to work with all the other subsystems and so forth. But I think that's the reason here. Arch is the blank canvas. And for some people, that's the attraction in and of itself. They want a blank canvas. They want to do their bespoke system in just the right way. And it's really fascinating that that user can exist on the same spectrum as the typical Omarchy user who just want to show up and have a nice system. But that's the beauty of open source. We can come together from such different backgrounds, such different motivations, and help Arch improve.
So now you have, within a couple of months, what I would call a successful Linux distro. Whether you want to use that word or not, that's what you got. So you've got that. How do you keep that success rolling? Like, how do you, now that you've got Omarchy and you've attracted hundreds of thousands of people who are interested in this darn thing, how do you keep that from imploding? How do you keep that going well into the future so people can say, you know what, I'm gonna move my whole corporate infrastructure to Omarchy and feel confident in it? How do you avoid the pitfalls of all these other Linux distributions that implement a code of conduct committees and various other organizations and things that end up kind of self-destructing themselves? How do you avoid that? How do you see that going forward over the next couple of years?
So the good thing here is that this is not my first rodeo. I have been in the open source world for a long time. Ruby on Rails was created more than 20 years ago. And
You're
on the back of
old.
Ruby on Rails, literally hundreds of billions of dollars, if not $1 trillion plus value has been created in the open market. Just one example, Shopify,
It's a
where I'm
pretty
on the
big
board,
example, though. I mean, let's
is
be honest. It's
whatever,
not a little
and
example.
50% of world e-commerce runs through that, runs on Ruby on Rails. It also has 2 decades plus of of a history behind it. So I know what it takes to create and run these systems that are being used by a lot of people. I know how easy it is to fall into the trap of sort of over bureaucratizing things.
Mm.
For the longest time, up until just 3-4 years ago, there wasn't even a Rails foundation. We didn't need one. Now, then there were specific circumstances that called upon that being a good idea. And that's great. I mean, I actually think there is a role for foundations. I think they've gotten a very bad rep because a lot of them have turned incredibly sour.
What are
And
you
down all those
talking
dark
about? They
alleys,
always work great.
as you mentioned, right? Like a lot of them have really gone sour. I don't think they have to. I think they are a product of the kind of people who start them and who run them. So if you get good people to start them and you get good people to run them, they can go in very different directions. But I'm not even interested in any of that. I'm interested in creating the best personal computer for me and anyone who shares even vaguely similar sensibilities to me. And I know that that is literally hundreds of thousands of people because that's how many have already shown up. So we are already well on the way to escape velocity. Escape velocity for open source is when there's enough adoption that you just know the system is going to keep on flowing through space, right? Like it is just escape the gravity that pulls down a lot of distro projects that get off the ground. There's an initial creator who has excitement for it, and then it kind of just collapses and gravity pulls it back down. So many people have already adopted Omarchy that I think that's unlikely to happen. I'm pushing it along all the trajectories I can. We have plans for how to make Omarchy work much better inside the enterprise, inside of corporations, set things up so that they're having an easier time managing, so tailoring the ISO. There's a lot of cool ideas there. Then there's all the ideas of OEM installs. How do we get Omarchy onto hardware that you can buy and get it pre-installed? I am super excited about a bunch of conversations I've had with different makers on that account. There's so many things we can do. We haven't even tapped in fully into ARM yet. So getting Omarchy onto ARM, getting
You're gonna go
onto
multi-architecture?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. I want one of those new, what is it, the Pi 5s where the whole computer's inside a keyboard.
The
Like that's
500s and the
straight out of
400s.
Miami,
Yes.
500 memories, right?
Plug that
Um,
sucker into the TV and go sit on the floor in
yeah,
front of it.
yeah, yes. So I want that. I want it on the Snapdragon machines that it's going to be shipping, hopefully in not too long. I want it everywhere because personally, I just want to use them much on all these computers. I love computers. I'd love for us to have full ARM builds. We've done a ton of work in one area here already. Vintage Intel Macs
Yeah.
used to require a lot of esoteric knowledge on Broadcom, Wi-Fi adapters, and all sorts of things you could set them up. We took the collection of that. It's like 10 things. And we baked those 10 things in, leaning on the T2 Linux project into the Omarchy ISO so that you could take just the same ISO, plug it into a vintage Intel Mac, and things would just work without you requiring reading
Sounds
500.
like Omarchy's pretty bloated to me. Got a lot of things in it there.
I mean, it's funny you joke about it because it is actually, there's about a gigabyte that is that. There's about a gigabyte of the 6 gigabyte that is the T2 stuff.
But that gives, but that's, you know, that is part of the joy of Linux is over the last couple of years, we've started increasingly having amazing hardware support built into the kernel and the kernel modules shipping with the systems. So you don't have to go hunting for drivers. That's kind of been the great thing. Old school Linux, where I came from, no hardware worked. Ever. Nothing ever worked. And you had to use these weird NDIS wrappers to get friggin' Wi-Fi working. And it was a constant nightmare. But nowadays, the driver situation is so much preferable to what we have on Windows. Because Windows, sure, the size of, let's say, Omarchy to Windows, it's actually pretty similar in terms of gigabytes, shipping. But Windows only ships with a small fraction of the drivers that you need. Whereas Linux in general ships with every driver you could ever possibly imagine, including for hardware that hasn't been made in 40 years. And that's kind of a nice thing. And that is kind of bloated. I mean, let's just be honest. That's bloated. But it's kind of good bloated.
It's bloated in the same
it's beautiful
sense
bloated.
that modern computers are bloated, right? And I'm like, I don't care. I just don't care. What I care about is the number of people who've brought vintage Intel Macs back from the dead. Perfectly fine computers in many cases with very nice screens. And if you go back a decade or more, they even had nice keyboards. It's hard to remember it now when you use a modern Mac. But once upon a time, Macs had great keyboards with 1.5 millimeters of travel. There's some wonderful 2012 machines that both have good screens and lovely keyboards.
Do you remember?
And have been left
do you remember? Go way back, because you and me are about the same age, right? We're both, I know you're not American, but I was a Jimmy Carter baby, right? So I was born in the late 70s, and there were the early Macintosh PowerBooks, the early color ones, like the 180 and whatnot. They had these beautiful keyboards on them, and they had, and this just blows my mind, friggin' trackballs. No touchpad mouse. They had a full-on galldarn trackball and these keys that were like 4 inches high, and they were just gigantic, and it was so sexy and wonderful. I'm saying this right now because I know the people over at Framework are watching, and I'm telling you right now, you put out that, and I'm buying it. I want a big, deep, clunky, clickety keyboard in my laptop, baby. I love the Framework laptops, but I want a trackball, and I want the big clunk, 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 clunk. You know what I want? Get to it, Nirav.
I will actually say that's one of the reasons why I'm such a big fan of Framework, and especially the Laptop 13. To me and my little fingers, this is the best laptop keyboard that I have used in living memory for me. I also get the mechanical keyboards when I'm in front of my desk. I love the mechanical keyboards. I love the clickety clacks. But on a laptop that isn't going to be as big as those old PowerBooks
going to be. Make them big.
I think. True.
The old Mac PowerBooks were like is this friggin' thick. It was like a giant Red Robin cheeseburger with an egg on top. It was just thick. So what? Make them thick. We don't got to make them thin anymore. I'm still spiking to a Framework on this one.
It's a good point you bring it up, because I think what I'm missing a little bit, and Framework is doing some wonderful work. What they've done on their laptop 12, I think, is really interesting.
Yeah.
Why does all new laptops look like a copy of a MacBook? Same aluminum shell, like they're chasing the same aesthetics. Not in all cases, but in many cases. I want more diversity. My first computer was an Amstrad 464. It had green enter keys, and I think it was a red escape key. Like, the thing was just gorgeous, and it was unique. The Commodore 64, which a bunch of my friends had, was brown.
The brown bread bin was beautiful, man.
Yeah. Like, computer can look different than just what Johnny Ive envisioned. And all respect to Johnny Ive, clearly, obviously, one of the most important designers of
even with Johnny Ive, I mean, shoot, some of the earlier work that he put out was friggin' bizarre. Translucent plastics and rounded things, and I mean, shoot, you know what I would really want? I want Framework to make like an old Apple eMate. I want one of those. I want like an ARM powered by Omarchy, green clamshell eMate.
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
dude.
I mean, they're getting there. I don't know if you've checked out the Laptop 12, but they have some really interesting color combinations. It looks very different. Like, I'll actually show you. So here's my 12 or 13. Right?
There's your 13.
Quite of sort of interesting little colors with the purple here and stuff like that.
Sure.
But mostly it looks like an aluminum laptop. 1 second.
Okay, go get it. Go grab the 12, buddy.
So I have the most boring of the 12. This is just the black version of it. But, like, you know what? That we're getting somewhere here, right? Like, it's plastic. It's really interesting. It flips around. Just there's something here where they're trying something new.
It's good.
And whether you love the 12 or you don't love the 12, I want just more experimentation. Which it's funny you mentioned that translucent clamshell, because my first modern Mac was the iBook from 2001, and it had exactly that white translucent shell, and I freaking loved it. I would buy that computer again in a heartbeat. White computers. You have to go to gaming PCs to find that.
Forget that. I want the old Bondi blue iBook, the one that looked like a clamshell toilet seat with the handle.
Yes.
I know it's ridiculous. I know
Yes.
it's got rubberized edges and everything. It looks like it's for preschool kids,
Right.
but I loved it. It was weird. It was goofy. It was fun to
Yes.
hold. It was different, man. This is
That's
part
what we
of
need.
this is part of what
We need
makes what
something
you are
different.
doing interesting. Like Omarchy looks different. It's not a vanilla stock GNOME interface. And again, a lot of this credit I have to send it over to the developer of Hyperland for Factory for putting such a good quality tiling manager together. I mean, and I want to tell everyone flat out, I don't use Omarchy. I install it every time you have a new release, and I dig it, but I'm not a tiling kind of guy, right? I like that early to mid 1990s aesthetic. So I run XFCE on top of X Libre. I literally have a Windows 95 theme installed on my Framework 13 right now. So you pop it open, it looks like I'm running a modern Windows 95. And it's on top of Open Mandriva and whatnot right now. And it's ridiculous, but mostly I like it when people look at my thing and they think I'm running Windows 95. It's a fantastic coffee
And to me,
shop
that's a
laptop.
huge part of the appeal of Linux. A huge part of the appeal is that we can make it look wildly different, and we can make it look personal. Omarchy ships with these 12 themes that are completely different. Some of them are super
Good looking
green,
ones.
and some of them are very white, and like it's just very unique, and it looks like nothing else that you'll find in Windows land or on the Mac. And we should embrace that. We should be embracing more color. One of the things that I've been sort of following along is the lack of color in the modern world. You can see those charts with like the different colors people used to buy cars in. If you go back to the 80s, all these colors, people would buy red cars and green cars and yellow
Yes.
cars. And then you look at modern sales, it is white, it's black, it's gray that just dominates, right? Like the majority of colors everywhere are disappearing from our world. And I want to bring
Bingo.
color back.
And it's not just color, it's just overall design. It's like in the computer industry, we've become like that industrial communist Russia, where every building is a giant concrete square and it's gray, every single one of them, and everyone looks the same. We don't have any old 57 Chevys with the red little wings and rims and cool little lights out the back that look like friggin' missiles. Like, we don't have things like that anymore, but computing used to. I remember Alienware, they used to make gaming computers that looked bonkers. The whole point was that they looked alien. And now Alienware, they make computers that look so amazingly boring, it makes me want to die. Like, the boringness almost kills me every time I look at computers from almost everyone. It makes me so sad.
I couldn't agree more. And I think this is also what's so exciting about what's happening in Linux land right now is we can turn this around. We don't have to accept the decolorization of the modern world. We don't have to accept brutalist design. We can just rebel and go like, God damn it, I'm going to make this Osaka Jade theme entirely green. And it's going to be so green, it's going to shout out in your entire room. And if I had it on the Osaka Jade right now, you'd see like half my face would be green. Like, we can just do things. We can just reintroduce color. We can reintroduce fun. We can make it look really good and make it also work good. That these aesthetics are not in opposition to functionality. This is one of the great misconceptions, unfortunately, I think some Linux nerds have been inflicted with, that aesthetics are not serious. What all the nice things you said about those early Mac designs, right? I remember the nerds I had in my circles who would decry, oh, this is just marketing. This is just colors. This is unimportant. Aesthetics are unimportant. That is such a poverty look on computers. Do you know what? We can be so much richer. We can have so much more abundance if we accept that things can look good. Not just look good. They can be beautiful.
Yes.
And if they're beautiful while also being functional, like, that really just speaks to us in a human way.
And here we are remembering those machines like the Commodore 64 bread bin 30 and 40 years later. And we're like, we're thinking back on, that was friggin' beautiful. I want that in my living room. That's what I like to see, and so I really do like what you're doing with Omarchy. Keep it up, keep going with it, and please, for the love of all that is holy, don't institute like weird codes of conduct and everything, because then I have to start covering how Omarchy Linux has gone woke, and that nobody wants that. No one wants that to be happening.
You'll find me 6 feet under before you can ever characterize any of the shit I'm doing as woke. So I don't think there's a lot of threat of that happening. But I don't want to also go overboard in the other direction. Sometimes, what is it, Nietzsche? Be careful about staring into the abyss. The abyss stares right back to you,
Yeah.
right? We can also get too focused on it, right? To be anti something. I want to be pro things. I want to be occasionally anti when things are batty and you say like, this is nonsense. We should get away from that. But the main way we get away from it is we route around it. We just build better things by ourselves and attract people who want to be part of that party. And I've invited everyone to the Omarchy party. Like, so what if you used to be woke, or you're not woke, or you don't care about politics, you care a lot about politics? Let's just show up and make computers fun together. Let's make them beautiful together. And we don't have to talk about politics. In fact, we should not be talking about politics when we are just making cool stuff together, because that's how we make that big tent. This is one of the things I found from Nirav's latest posting at Framework. They really have a objectively awesome mission to keep Framework big tent. Let everyone from all facets of life, from all stripes of political flavor, come under here. Just enjoy computers that you can repair yourself together. Now, some people don't want that, right? They want a very narrow tent. They just want a tent that are people who are just like them, and their minds are just like them.
Just like them.
I want nothing to do with that. I want the big tent, and I'm willing to, like, I don't have to agree with you either, right? Like, it has to go both ways. People don't have to agree with me. I don't have to agree with them. We don't even have to talk about it. Let's talk about computers. That's so much more fun in most cases anyway, at least when it's with strangers. I have very rarely, if ever, enjoyed talking politics with strangers.
Yes.
But I have almost always enjoyed talking computers with strangers. That's something that can really bring us together, and we got to get back to that.
When we were kids, I mean, I don't know how it was like for you, but I was a nerdy little kid, and there was a very narrow group of us that we didn't bully each other, right? We weren't getting picked on the playground because we were in the library with the couple of Apple II clones and whatnot that we had in there. And I couldn't tell you what the religions or their families' politics were. We were all just nerding out over our common nerdery, and that's what bonded us together. To this day, I look back at those kids fondly. I have no idea. Were they the same religion as me? I don't know. I don't know who their family voted for. Did their family voted for Reagan or Buchanan? I don't friggin' know. But we really enjoyed playing Oregon Trail together. We really enjoyed pirating Oregon Trail together, and we had a good time with it. And I feel like there's so much nerdiness that could bring us all together. Like I invited you on the show today. You came on, and we can have a great time. We can chit chat about a wide range of topics. All of the people that running various foundations and whatnot who have been attacking you and Framework and the developer of Hyperland and the creator of JavaScript and so many other people, yelling about them and calling them names like fascists and Nazis and whatnot, they won't talk. Those people, you invite them to just sit down and have a chat, and you could say, let's not talk politics. Let's just talk about that cool new release you just put out. Let's talk about that new version of GNOME you put out and how it's got cool accessibility features and a wicked sweet icon set. Let's just talk about that. No, can't do it because you're a fascist. We can't nerd out together. They don't wanna. And that to me, I agree. The big tent. Let's all just hang out. Let's set up our machines. Let's have a friggin' LAN party. Let's have an install party, order some pizzas, and have a good time. I don't understand why people can't do that. I mean,
I think we're going to get back to that, by the way. I am endlessly optimistic when it comes to this topic, because we've already watched in broader society this sort of crest, this peak of it, and then we're downhill from here. I think that downhill is going to continue. I think this stuff, in even just one more year, I'd be surprised if it's not unrecognizable. This nuttery is going to get smaller and smaller, because this is what happens in these purity spirals. They start eating each other 5 minutes after they have successfully eaten someone from the outside. They'll just eat each other, and at the end, there's almost nothing left. And the rest of us just got to go like, all right, we're not going to follow them down that rabbit hole, right? We're not going to do the purity spiral stuff. If you were part of that and you saw the error of your ways and you go like, oh shit, I really got taken in here, you're still welcome. Do you know what? No one is irredeemable. Everyone can come back. Let's get into the big tent together. We don't have to agree on everything, but we can restore computers to just something we can focus on together, focus on the love of computers, the aesthetics of computers, just the sheer joy of them, and make cool software together. Linux to me is one of those wonderful, super broad communities that can have people from all over the world creating something that works both for them individually, that works for someone halfway around the world, that works for someone commercially. It is just one of those wonders of the world. And we should treat it as such and not demean it with all this petty nonsense.
Beautiful. Yes. David, thank you for hanging out with me, man. I really appreciate it. Give people a few URLs. Tell them about some of those amazing universal resource locators you got.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed it too. I think we need just more of this, more chatting about these things, more normalizing that we can just hang out and talk about computers.
Yes.
So, personally, I'm on dhh.dk. You can find links to anything. And if you've somehow been following
Where
your
is
show, and you
.dk? What is .dk? Is that's Danish?
Denmark.
Denmark.
I am originally Danish, and I thought, you know what? I couldn't get .com anyway, so .dk seemed fitting. dhh.dk. That has links to my X profile and even LinkedIn, if you're into that, and the rest of it and all my projects.
Beautiful, beautiful. Everyone go to lunduke.com. All my links are up there. One page, just HTML, nothing weird. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, all those subscribers. Thank you to David. Go check out Omarchy. Take 5 minutes, install it on whatever machine you've got. And if you hate it, it's fine. You can just wipe it out. If you love it, awesome. Post a screenshot of it. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast. Say goodbye, David. Well done.